So hello, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well tonight. It is so great to see everyone here. So yes, we're going to be recording the following presentation so that you may access this material in the future. Just know that any personal details will be from the recording, such as your name, your voice, personal details, and so forth. So before we start the presentation tonight, I'd actually just like to quickly talk about Dr. Krishnan's research team, which has partnered with the amazing support group here. So our research operates out of Emory University, and we focus on what we call patient-centered outcomes research. So some topics that we study include young stroke and mild stroke, comparing effectiveness of rehab following stroke across various healthcare settings, the management of caregiver burden following neurological conditions, and the prevention and early detection of secondary complications following stroke. Okay, so I'd now like to introduce our wonderful guest speaker. Thank you so much for coming back, Keith. So Keith Miles is the owner of the law office of Keith R. Miles, LLC. The firm handles estate planning and elder law matters throughout the states of both Georgia and North Carolina. Keith Miles is a member of Elder Council, the Estate Planning Council of North Georgia, and the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, also known as the NAELA. Mr. Miles received his JD from the University of Maryland School of Law and his LLM in taxation from the University of Alabama School of Law. He is honored to be a part of the Brain Injury Association of America's preferred attorney program for the state of Georgia in the financial issues category. So before we start, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute your mic during the presentation, unless, of course, you have a question or a comment, and this will just help us prevent any unnecessary noise or feedback. So I will now hand the mic over to you, Mr. Miles. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that introduction. And of course, thank you to the Young and the Restless group for having me. And of course, BIAG for having me as well. So thank you all. I really love these opportunities to just kind of talk about anything really legally related. But in particular tonight, the title is Insights into Georgia Medicaid, but I'm going to cheat a little bit. So we're going to have Medicare and Medicaid. We can kind of talk about both because they're kind of related when you're trying to get some health, insurance and take care of certain things. So we're going to kind of talk about that. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully that will be visible for everyone. So I'm about to share, so let me know if you can see the slide. So I always like to make my presentations very laid back. So I know sometimes people hear presentation and they think they're just going to sit back. So I want to try to involve you as much as possible. My idea, since we're doing Zoom, on Zoom, you have a little reaction button if you look in the lower right. And if you click on that reaction button, you'll have a yes in green and no. So if everyone can kind of, we're going to do some practice questions. I see a few people are pressing it so good I can know it's working. So we're going to do a few quick questions just to practice you guys hitting that button so we can get it going. So practice question number one: if we had the song till the one day when the lady met this fellow and they knew it was much more than a hunch that this group must somehow form a family. Is this from the theme song for the Addams Family? All right. Okay, so see most people have no, because the Addams Family was the creepy and the kooky, mysterious and spooky, the altogether ooky, the Addams Family, and you know the rest. And you got to add the snaps. Don't forget the 2 snaps at the end. It was one of my favorite shows growing up. Okay, so you're on a roll. So we're gonna go to the second one. Now the Brady Bunch. That was, of course, the song of the first slide. Was the Brady Bunch a blended family? And that's a picture of the Brady Bunch there, of course. Mike and Carol Brady and the 6 kids. Okay. So seeing a lot of yeses, and that is correct. We had Carol, had 3 daughters, Marsha, Jan, and Cindy. Mike Brady had 3 sons, Greg, Peter, and Bobby. And together they became the Brady Bunch, all right? So that's in estate planning, we're going to talk more on Medicaid, Medicare, but the group I've spoken to before knows that being a blended family can come into play in estate planning. It will come into play a little bit in Medicaid, depending on the dynamics of the couple, because Medicaid is what's called means tested, and we'll talk about that. And means tested means they look at your assets. So sometimes what happens with couples is that they may come together if it's a second marriage and they have a prenuptial agreement that might say, I keep my stuff and you keep your stuff. But if they go to apply for Medicaid, Medicaid just says it's all one big pile. And that can cause some difficulties later. Practice question number 3. And I want to know who really knows the Brady Bunch. Marsha Brady suffered a broken nose after getting hit by a baseball. By a baseball, yes or no? I'm seeing some yeses and some no's, so it's a little bit of a mix. I think some people are still trying to figure out. I see a lot of no's. Okay. Well, let's see. I got a little video clip that I'm going to play and see if you got it right. It was a football. Okay, so definitely was not debate. We don't need to see that kind of violence against. So we're gonna go forward when we won one time. All right. So she of course had her broken nose from that football. This kind of situation, of course, she needed medical attention, but that's what's called acute care. Okay, short term, get someone in, fix them up, hopefully get them out. Depending on how serious it is, they may need to be in the hospital for a period of time. But even then, the thought is they're going to go back home and get care there. So a lot of times the question is someone seeking acute care or are they seeking long-term care? Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go through. Okay, so we're going to start the presentation. We're going to get the running and get through the materials that we're going to cover. All right. So I always like to start by assuming not everyone's familiar with the whole big picture. So I want to kind of take what they say, the 30,000-foot view of things and just get the big view of everything. And this is really timely for me because I had a client who came this morning and she has MS, multiple sclerosis. So she was asking some questions, what's the difference between Medicaid and Medicare? And I said, wow, you're really timely. You give me some practice explaining some of this. So I figured if she doesn't know, a lot of other people don't know the basics. So I don't want to dive into things and people aren't familiar with what the differences are. Okay, so Medicare versus Medicaid, what's the difference? They're of course both medically related, but there are some very important differences. Fast facts, okay? Funding. When you hear Medicare, that is federal. Okay, that's entirely federal. If you work and you've had your payroll taxes and some of that Medicare tax came out, that went to the federal government. Medicaid is a split between the state and the federal government where they both pay towards the program. The federal government gives different states different amounts, so it's not the same for each state, but each state receives funds from the federal government to do the program. What does that mean? If you look at the second piece, Medicare is the same program nationwide. If I get on Medicare in Georgia and I move to California, I move to Texas, I move to New York, it doesn't matter. I'm on the same exact program. So once you're on Medicare, that's federal. Medicaid is, because it is a state federal effort, each state is allowed to make its own rules. So they get funding from the government, but each of them makes separate rules. So if you are in Georgia and you go through the process to get Georgia Medicaid and get care there, and you decide that you need to relocate to Texas, you will not automatically get Texas Medicaid. You will have to go through that process again. Okay, you are not what they say grandfathered in one state and just carries over. Okay, so it's very important to understand that, especially if it comes to moving someone who may be in a situation, maybe sometimes people like to have family members close to them, but if they are on Medicaid, they may need to make sure they are potentially staying in that state to get those benefits. Eligibility. Medicare was designed originally to benefit the elderly. Elderly meaning 65 and up. So it was age-based, okay? It is now available to those under 65 if you have certain conditions, if you have a disability, get SSDI, Social Security Disability, for 24 months, you can get Medicare. If you have end-stage renal failure or you have ALS, what's called Lou Gehrig's disease. So there are certain ways you can get Medicare if you're under 65, but it's geared towards age. It's usually thought of as, okay, I'm gonna work, be on a private insurance with my employer, and then once I get to 65 and retire, Medicare will take over and then be my source of health insurance. Medicaid is not age-based per se, is low income based. It's resource based, okay? It's designed to make sure people have healthcare at all. So it could be for someone who is a very young person who just doesn't have a lot, or of certain families that don't have a lot, or it could be someone with a disability, or it could also be someone 65. We have in Georgia 2 types of Medicaid we'll talk about. One is called Family Medicaid, a branch of Family Medicaid, and another is ABD, aged, blind, and disabled. Of course, the disabled understand, the blind is understanding, aged is 65 or older, okay? Cost, if you're on Medicare, you have some deductibles and some co-pays. So similar to your current insurance, if you ever had a private insurer through your job or use some health insurance and you go and they say you got to meet your deductible, it's similar kind of setup with Medicare. Medicaid, you have little to no copay, okay? Again, because it's linked to someone with low income and resources, they're taking more of the cost on. That's also part of the whole federal state coordination on paying for that program. Okay. True, false. You can only receive Medicare and Medicaid if you're under a certain level of assets. I see a mix of answers. You can only receive Medicaid based on a certain amount of assets. Medicare is not means tested, okay? So it's a very important distinction. If you are on Medicare, many of you have probably shopped Amazon at one point, and Jeff Bezos, I don't know how much he's worth, 100 billion plus. He gets to 65, he can get Medicare, okay? It is not based on resources, okay? Social Security disability, if someone has worked and they've received their certain amount of quarters, but they haven't made it to 65, maybe they're getting Social Security disability. Or maybe they've never worked, but maybe they have a disability, someone has the ability to get the work, disability based on the work record of their parent. If you get Social Security disability for 24 months, you go potentially into getting Medicare. That's not means tested. We don't need to know what your assets are. Medicaid, asset, we'll talk about what that is. Part of what I'm called is an elder lawyer. I had to do estate planning on one side, which is the traditional wills, trusts, power of attorney, advance directive. And then the other side of my practice is what's called elder law. The term elder was always meant in the beginning to just handle issues of aging. So it was geared towards the elderly, but the same issues of incapacity and needing government benefits can apply to those who are disabled, who are not elderly. So the elder law practice is going to handle dealing with social supplemental security income, SSI. And SSI is a cash payment. In 2021, it cannot exceed $794 a month. But if you get SSI, you automatically get Medicaid. Okay, so if you get SSI, say you make you get $650 of SSI, then you will get Medicaid automatically. You can get SSDI and SSI. So if I had SSDI for $650, I can get another 144 SSI. So I'll get Medicaid automatically for just having at least $1 of SSI. And then after 2 years on SSDI, I would get Medicare. Okay, so you can have both. You can have both SSDI and SSI, and you can have Medicare and Medicaid. Okay. True, false. Medicare and Medicaid cover the same items. I see some yeses. Some no, yes, no, yes, no, no, no. Okay, I see a lot of no's. And generally the no's will have it. You have some similarities, some overlap, of course, but there are definitely some things that Medicaid will cover that Medicare will not. And the most important one to highlight is long-term care nursing home. Okay, so if someone is trying to get long-term care, and we'll talk about what that means, custodial care, that kind of care is not going to be covered long-term by Medicare. They may do it for a short period of time, but then they will not pay for it, and then you will have to come out of your pocket or find a source like Medicaid or some other source to pay for that. Some people use long-term care insurance to help. It depends on what your personal situation is. You see some there private pay, some people have savings, some people do what's called reverse mortgages and tap into the equity of their home to do things. Some people have life insurance or cash value. Some people have annuities. So you'll have to figure out a lot of times how you're going to pay for long-term care. And that's when Medicaid really comes in, because those costs can obviously get expensive, and you can go through a situation where you can pretty much exhaust your life savings if you're forced to pay out of pocket. So what we are trying to do a lot of times as elder law attorneys with people is try to talk to them about, first of all, pre-planning. And that's a lot of times people, when you try to talk to them about planning for long-term care, they're usually very optimistic, and they say, well, I don't really have to worry about that, or my family will help me, or this and that. So we try to encourage people to have that conversation. But more likely than not, sometimes people have the intent to plan, but maybe life happens, right? And when life happens, with Medicaid, there's a 5-year window for when you put an application in, that they look back, they look at your assets at that point in time, but there's a 5-year period where they look back to see if you have given away any assets. And if you have, you get penalized. So what happens sometimes is we try to talk to them in general, say, okay, we want to look 5 years ahead whenever we talk to people, but if they don't do it, or something happens where you can't get that 5 years, we do what's called crisis planning. And there's certain strategies we can do to try to help people qualify if they can't go through that 5 years. But the critical part is to understand Medicaid Medicare will not cover long-term care, and Medicaid may cover long-term care, but then the question is, where does it cover long-term care? Okay. I know a lot of people, in particular, if they get, when I said where it covers it, a lot of people want to get coverage for their health care at home. Okay. Because when we think about getting coverage, we don't want to have to leave our home and go to a nursing home to do it. Now, the way the program was originally designed with Medicaid, you had the long-term care in a nursing home setting. A lot of people said, we want to get treated at home. So they did what's called ask for a waiver. All right. So if you hear the term Medicaid waiver, it's a waiver of the setting where you get your care. Okay. So if you want to try to get care at home, that is a Medicaid waiver of the need to get the care in a nursing home and trying to waive it so you can get it outside and getting in the home. There are two types of, when we say home care, we want to make sure we're clear what we're referring to, because Medicare and Medicaid both have payments for home health care, and there's a difference from home health care and home care. Okay, so I want to kind of talk to you about that, so you kind of, when you hear certain terms, just like we talk about Medicare and Medicaid, you understand the distinction. I want you to understand the distinction between home health and home care. Okay? When you hear home health, that's going to be something medically ordered by a physician. Okay, there's some medical aspects, some medical skill required to do that. So you're going to have either licensed, nurse, therapist, social worker, somebody who has licensed training to do it. The home care, the non-medical services, could be companion care, sitting agencies, trained care aides, but they're not licensed for medical duties. And we'll talk about what assistance for daily activities. We'll talk about that a little bit, what that means. Okay. So here's some examples to make it kind of more concrete. You can see up top, it says, while both home health and home care services are provided in the home setting, there are sharp differences between each. The biggest difference, according to care.com, is that home health care is a higher level of care that is deemed medically necessary by a physician. Also, home health is covered by Medicare, Medicaid, and most private insurance plans, while home care is often paid for privately or sometimes by long-term care insurance. So has anyone heard about long-term care insurance? That's another part of this. There's kind of two different types that are out there. There's long-term care insurance that's called the traditional long-term care. And that's where you basically pay into this policy that you will use. It's more of a reimbursement style. If once you need it, you have a certain period of time you have to wait. So say you have a need for it, you might have something that says 30 days or 60 days or 90 days of having care before you can actually have the insurance company give you coverage. And then once you get to that point, you have to pay whatever agency and then submit your bill to the insurance company and they reimburse you. So it's a little bit different than the traditional thought of health insurance, where you just say, hey, here's my insurance card, and then the company pays first, or you might have a copay with them. With the traditional long-term care, you're going to put out the money and then get reimbursed. Also, with traditional long-term care, what happened is that people would pay for years and years and years, and maybe they never got a chance to use it, right? So if I might pay for long-term care and I might die of a heart attack, all right, I never got a chance to use my long-term care insurance. So what the insurance companies started to do when they realized people were kind of backing off from it, they started to make we call them hybrids. So they'll take life insurance, and maybe some of you've heard it, where they have riders. So they'll have life insurance with a long-term care rider. And the rider will allow you to tap into some of the benefits of the policy if you need it for long-term care. So that's another source of funding there. So with the examples here, home care, meal prep, light house cleaning, you have someone come in, just light house cleaning, help you get dressed, some transportation maybe to and from appointment, reminders, yeah, you need to take your medicine to help keep up with your medications. Home health, now you're talking about something more medically oriented, wound care, IV, intravenous nutrition therapy, injections. So those monitoring serious illness, unstable health status, have a nurse come in. So that's the kind of difference between those two. So again, Medicare and Medicaid would have pay for the home health. Home care would be more private or maybe long-term care insurance. And this is just a graphic talking about that, showing you visually. Again, home health covered by Medicare, private health, Medicaid, and Medicaid waiver. And then home care potentially by your policy of long-term care insurance, depending on what it is that you have. And of course, private pay, you can always private pay out of your savings or other means. Okay. So true, false. There is only one type of Medicaid program in Georgia. We're going to say false. Okay, I mentioned earlier, there's a family-oriented Medicaid. So sometimes you use the term low-income Medicaid. There's a peach care for kids, so specifically geared for kids. For many, we're talking about age, blind, and disabled. That's where we start talking about the long-term care, nursing home, Medicaid waiver. That's going to be your age, blind, and disabled, ABD. Okay, but there's not just one type of Medicaid in Georgia. So you may have someone on Medicaid who's a young child in the family, but you also may have someone where we're thinking about, an elderly person or someone on disability who needs Medicaid. So they're both Medicaid, but they're in different branches of Medicaid. Okay. Now, Georgia Medicaid waiver programs. Okay, again, waiver programs help people who are elderly or have disabilities. Go move this up here. I can't see everything I'm looking at. And need help to live in their home or community instead of an institution, such as a nursing home, or an intermediate care facility for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. So you may have someone who's had a disability since birth, maybe like autism or something like that, cerebral palsy, some other things. Each program offers several core services, and usually they're going to focus on that personal support, so assistance with daily living activities. We'll talk about that. We mentioned home health services, so those things that are medical in nature, nursing, home health aid, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. Also, respite care, right? We want to always remember caregivers, right? Their caregivers usually have a benefit of getting the ability to send the person away maybe for a couple of days or a weekend and getting a break. So that's also an important part of these benefits as well. And we talked about this earlier. What is a Medicaid waiver? Some Medicaid services is only paid for if the person lives in a nursing home or state institution. So the states can ask the federal government to waive that rule, which allows them to provide services in someone's home and community care. Okay, so that's how we get the term Medicaid waiver. Now, the key part to remember with this, and we'll go through some of these programs that say the names here, we'll go through the programs. When you are on quote unquote regular Medicaid, the nursing home Medicaid, if you meet the test, and we'll talk about what the tests are, you will get into your service. All right, it's like an entitlement. When I met the criteria, the federal government and the state pay into money into this program, and they will provide for you. If you get an application to a Medicaid waiver, you may be accepted and meet the criteria, but not actually get the service because waivers have waiting lists. They have limited space. Okay, so part of the problem is people are trying to get on waivers, but the funding is not there. So the regular Medicaid is essentially whoever can qualify we will take care of you. Now, there's some talk now of potentially capping the number for each state at a certain amount and kind of saying once that runs out, that's it. But right now, if whoever gets on there, that contribution of federal state, that number goes up. So the more people go on, the more the federal and state contribute. Waiver programs, they say this is how many slots we're gonna give. So if there's 10,000 people who want it and there's 800 slots, 9,200 people on the waiting list. Okay, so just understand that Medicaid waivers will have the waiting list. They're not guaranteed. So some of these programs, there's a Georgia pediatric program, provides services to medically fragile children and services provided in homes and communities. So of course, you're not going to try to take a child out of their home and put them in nursing homes, so they're going to get that care at home. So that's Georgia pediatric. Where we're going to start to see things is, for our group is a little later, but there's also something called NOW and COMP waiver programs. So New Options Waiver Program NOW and Comprehensive Supports Waiver Program COMP provides services, supports for people with intellectual or didn't mean to do that. Hit my mouse by mistake. Intellectual or developmental disabilities. And that will provide an array of services designed for that population, support employment, residential services, special equipment and supplies, maybe some vehicle adaptation. Okay. So here's an example. I wanted to kind of show you the extent of what I mean when I said there's a wait list. Now this is for the particular NOW and COMP, which I mentioned, the intellectual and developmental disabled. So you see the numbers here of how many people are waiting. Okay, so you have a lot of interest in these programs, but in blue, you maybe have 100 slots, 125, and you have thousands of people who want the waiver. And that's the question for going forward is, what's the funding going to be for these programs in the future, right? So there's Medicaid that gives you your health insurance, right? Like I said, if you're going to the acute care side, but on the long-term care and these home-based services, that's really where people are trying to get some help, and they're not funding those slots in the same ratio as people's interests. Okay, there's an elderly and disabled waiver program. Okay, and that would be the Community Care Services Program, CCSP, and source service options using resources in the community environment. They serve frail elderly and disabled Georgians under a nursing facility level of care. So part of these programs, you have to meet these level of care. I'm not a healthcare professional, so what that exact care is, I would need someone else to tell me exactly what's the difference between intermediate care and nursing facility level of care. But the program uses that level. Getting service coordination, adult daycare. So I mentioned respite care in terms of sending someone maybe away overnight over a weekend, but sometimes there's some adult daycare where you can go for the day. You want to get some companionship for the day. You want to get out the house, have some place to go. There's certain centers that you can go for adult daycare. And of course, that helps the caregiver as well to refresh his or herself. Some personal care help, home delivered meals, some other things that can go into that, some enhanced case management services. So there are a lot of potentially good things that can come from these programs. One in particular, independent care waiver program. And this one for this group potentially offers services to a limited number of adults between the age of 21 and 64, okay? Eligibility is based on either nursing facility or hospital level care for adults with severe physical disabilities or traumatic brain injury, okay? Again, personal support, home health services, specialized medical equipment and supplies, and some home modification potentially. So there's some good here, but I wanted you to see here, this is a snapshot. When you do these waiver programs, the state has to go to the federal government, file an application and say, we're trying to apply for this waiver, and give them details of how the program would run. So one of the things they tell them is, here's how many people we anticipate having participate in this program. So in the independent care waiver program that was submitted originally for Georgia, it's actually technically expired and they're applying for a renewal. The first year, they do either 3 or 5 years. So they did a 5-year request for the program when they did it last. So the first year you see they had asked for 1,619 spots, then 1,699, then 1,779, then 1,859, and 1,939. So I don't remember exactly, but I think, if I remember reading the BIAC materials, I think it was something about 50,000 brain injuries a year. Is that correct? Or something in that realm? So you're looking at 1939, right? So that's gives you an idea of where these slots are under this waiver. And if you see up here above in the description, it says the state will submit a waiver amendment to CMS to modify the number of participants specified for any years, including when a modification is necessary due to legislative appropriation or another reason. So these numbers aren't even set. If the funding changes after they submitted the waiver and they have less money that the legislature allocated, those numbers could go down. Okay, so just wanted to give you an idea of what the scale is of where the potential population is versus what the slots are on these. Okay. Just wanted to also let you know, like when you do these waivers, each state can do tailored waivers. So just like we've seen examples, some intellectually and developmentally disabled, some other states may have HIV positive HIV waivers. Some other states have brain injury. Some of them have geared towards traumatic brain injury. Some have geared towards acquired brain injury. They can make them as tailored as they want to. So here's a list of some other states that have had waivers. And so if you remember what I said, if you move from one state to another, you're going to start over, right? So you may want to consider that if you think you might need this type of service, to see if that state has a waiver program specifically geared towards brain injury. If not, maybe physical disability or something. You want to check those programs. But that's the kind of current list. The last time I looked, I admit I haven't looked at it as recently as I need to make sure the new ones haven't come on or the old ones have expired. But I just wanted to give you a sense of scale. Not every state has them. So you need to, and some states have more than one. So Massachusetts has 3, Mississippi had a couple. So you'll want to investigate the state if you want to relocate. Okay. True, false. Any resident of Georgia can enroll in the Medicaid program. Any resident of Georgia can enroll in the Georgia Medicaid. I should say Georgia Medicaid. Okay, so that's going to be false. There's 2 types of eligibility. There's non-financial, which is your health, meaning the health criteria. I mentioned the nursing level care, intermediate level care. So someone who doesn't have a health need cannot meet that first requirement, the non-financial. But even if you meet the non-financial, you have to meet the financial. So remember, Medicaid is needs-based. So the need is analyzed 2 ways. Needs-based is analyzed 2 ways: income and assets. It's not one or the other. So if you have too many assets, but your income was okay, you won't qualify. If you have too much income and your assets were okay, you won't qualify. You have to have both. And that's part of what we sit down to talk to people about, is trying to make sure they're either already there or we have a strategy to get them there. Okay. I want to give you 2021 numbers to give you an idea of what those income and asset limits look like. And when you first look at them, I'm sure people are like, well, how in the world are many people going to meet these limits? If you're talking about 2000, someone might have that, over the course of time, or different methods of, I have a car, I have a bank account, I have this, I have that. How am I going to get $2,000, under $2,000 and still live, right? So this resource limit is missing one word: countable. Okay. Not every asset is a countable asset. Some assets are exempt assets. So part of the first analysis is to say, okay, what are all the assets and which assets are exempt, so we don't need to worry about them in terms of qualifying for Medicaid, and which assets are countable. The work begins on the countable side to try to figure out how to get down to the 2,000, but only from the countable. Okay. Income. You see here the 794, there's the SSI. I mentioned if you have SSI, you automatically get Medicaid. So if you have the 794 or less, you will get Medicaid automatically. So your income is going to be okay. If you're above 794, so say you get SSDI for $2,000 a month, you're going to be above the SSI limit. So you're not going to get the SSI. You're going to have to go to one of the other nursing homes or community care categories, which gives you up to 3 times the SSI limit. So it's up to 3 times the SSI limit. So if the SSI limit for next year goes to 800, then these amounts will go to 2,400. So they're always 3 times the income of the SSI. If you're under that limit, you can qualify for these other categories. Okay. The question then becomes, what if I'm above here, the 2,382? If I have $2,400, what happens then? It depends on your state. I mentioned I'm in Georgia and North Carolina. North Carolina is what's called a medically needy state, so you can spend down with your medical expenses and be okay. But in Georgia, we are an income cap state. That means if you're even $1 over, you don't qualify. So if you have $2,383, then they'll say, sorry, you're $1 over. Now, is that the end? No. We have something in Georgia called a qualified income trust. It might also be called, here called a Miller Trust. A Miller Trust is based on the case. The Miller is the name of the case. Well, we can basically create a special type of trust for the income side. Now, this is not the resource side, not the asset side. Income side, we can create a special trust and put the excess income. So if I had 2,400, I could put the $18, or I could put the whole thing in the qualified income trust, the whole 2,400, and I would qualify. Okay, I would have to do that each and every month. Okay, because my income is going to be over. So every assuming it's pension and Social Security, that's going to be constantly streaming in each and every month, I'm going to have the same problem. So I'm going to have to use that qualified income trust each and every month, put those deposit amounts in, and the amounts from the qualified income trust will then go to Medicaid or the nursing home. Okay, so that's the logistics on the income side. On the resource side, if I'm over, like I mentioned, you split out between the exempt and countable. And then if I have certain amount over with the countable, that's when I have to start examining what my strategies are. True, false. The only way to help lower your assets in order to qualify for Medicaid is by using a special needs trust. The only way to help lower your assets in order to qualify for Medicaid is by using a special needs trust. I see a lot of yeses. And I'm going to say no. A special needs trust is one of them, but it's not the only way. Okay. As I mentioned, in many cases, what's happening, someone has too many countable assets. So we have some strategies that might be able to work. You might be able to purchase exempt assets. What do I mean? Say I have 38,000, I have 30,000. The limit's 2. I'm 28,000 over. There's certain assets. Your house is an exempt asset. Car is an exempt asset. You get one car that's exempt. I should say not multiple. You get one car. So say I have a very old car that's worth a couple of $1,000s. I'm over by $28,000. I might say, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this car I have and get a new car. So say I just go get a $30,000 Mercedes-Benz. That's a one exempt asset. I've taken my countable cash and converted it into an exempt asset. I can then tell Medicaid, I only have one car in the house, I'm good. Or, so that's the kind, and of course, 2,000, or maybe have 1,800 left in the bank or whatever. That's the kind of simple planning, simple strategies. Of course, a lot of times it's going to be a lot harder than that. Other items, you can pay debt. If you have credit card bills, your mortgage you want to pay off, you can pay off debts. So you can lower your assets in multiple ways. Okay, it doesn't have to just be a special needs trust. So part of what we talk to people about is letting them know what is available for them to do. Okay, but if you do need to do a special needs trust, we'll talk about that and what that is. And we have basically two types: a special needs trust, which is a first person, what we call a first person. That's when you're using your own funds. So for example, if I had a personal injury that caused my disability and I got a large settlement, okay? If that large sum, say it was 300,000, obviously I'm gonna be over the $2,000 limit with that 300,000 after I pay the attorneys, because of course the attorneys gotta get their cut. All right, so after the 300,000, I can put that amount in a special needs trust because it's my 300,000. That's what makes it a first party. And then if I put that amount into the special needs trust, as long as a trust is written and designed a certain way, it will not be considered a resource to me. And that 300,000 can be used for my benefit in certain ways. Supplemental needs trust is what's called a third party, what we refer to as third party. There is no second party. So in case someone's wondering, well, how do you go from first to third? There's no second. I don't know why. All right, so first party is when it's your own funds. Third party, it means it's anyone else's funds besides the person applying for the benefit. So if I am applying for Medicaid and someone leaves me money in say they passed away in their will, but they created a supplemental needs trust under their will for me because they knew that I had a government benefit, that trust that they created was using their money. So that's what makes it a third party. It was their, $250,000 or their life insurance or their IRA or something that they're payable to pay the trust, not my funds. So that's a supplemental needs trust, and that will go into the trust, and also has the same effect that it will not be considered as my resource. It will be in the trust in a certain way that keeps it from being attributed to me in terms of qualifying, okay? Now, the key difference between them, we'll talk about that. Just so I understand, all right, you said you're putting this 300,000 into this special needs trust that I got from my personal injury settlement, but now I don't have any way to use it. Well, no, that's the special needs trust can be used for you by the trustee in the trust. Okay, so you can have some vacations. Got to be careful about that. So vacations doesn't mean, you use the special needs trust to pay for everybody in the family to go to Disney World. They have to pay their way. The trust will pay for your way. Right? So there's certain rules of how this works, right? Because they don't want people to take advantage. Pay education, home furnishings, out-of-pocket expenses, recreations. You want to golf, go out to the links, could pay your membership there. Vehicles, especially vans that do adapt some things, special things. So it can be used to improve your life and not be included in your resource limit so that you can get your public benefit and then also have this pool of funds to help improve your life. I mentioned special needs trust on purpose because people have heard about that. There's something else called an ABLE account, which is more recent. Okay, an ABLE account is marketed as something similar to a 529. If you've heard of that 529 plan, where someone could put some money into a plan and have it grow tax-free for someone to go to college or later in life education expenses. This is a similar kind of account where you can put money into someone, but they have to have certain qualifications to get that account created for them. Of course, it's related to someone with a disability. Georgia calls theirs stable. Other states will have their own version. So these are state level accounts. Some states will allow out-of-state people, out-of-state residents to invest in their ABLE. So sometimes you can forum shop and see whichever one's the best for you. Other states only allow their residents. I believe Georgia is one of those. But if someone knows other than that, please correct me. So I kind of wanted to compare these two so you understand when you may be able to use the special needs trust and when you may be able to use it ABLE. They both can serve that purpose of putting money into it and not have it be a resource. So I mentioned my other example of having an extra, 300,000. That was a tremendously large amount. So you see the first part here, eligibility, special needs trust, the first party, if it's your funds, and there's an important restriction that I want to mention. When you're trying to do a first party special needs trust, you can only contribute your funds to one when you are under 65. Okay, so if you have something that happens and you are over 65, and that means 60, your 61st birthday. So if you're up to date, you're 64 and 364 days, you can contribute. Your 65th birthday, you can't put anything there. Okay. Third party, when it's someone else's money, there's no age limit. Okay, so if I passed away and my father was on Medicaid and he's 74, I can leave him money in my third-party supplemental need trust for him because there's no age limit. It's my money, it's not his, so there's no age 65 limit. ABLE accounts, they have a quirky requirement that the only people who can open it is if your disability onset before you were 26. Okay, so if you had, say in this group, you had your brain injury happen when you were 28, you would not be eligible to open an ABLE account. It makes no sense, but that's the rule, okay? That is not saying you have to create one before you are 26. It means you have to onset the disability before you're 26. So if you are now 48 and you never opened an ABLE, but your brain injury happened when you were 22, you can do an ABLE account because even though you're 48, your disability onset before 26, okay? Uh, Another important limit, I'm going to ignore the SSI piece right now, it's not as important. The annual contribution limit. There is none with the special needs. That's why I said I can give that example. The 300,000 can go in there. Multiple people can do their own special needs trust. There's not any limit on how many special needs trusts you can have. I can make one for my son. His mama can make one. Grandparents can each make one. Uncles and aunts, they can have multiple. Able account, you can only have one, and it can only have an annual contribution limit of 15,000. So that means if grandma put in 10,000, everyone else in the world can only put in 5. Okay, it's not 15,000 per donor, it's 15,000 total for the year. If someone is working, if the beneficiary who has the able account is working, they can add up, they can contribute themselves up to 12,670. Not someone else, but they contribute themselves up to 12,670. So you can see an able account is much more limited. So if you have large amounts, someone's trying to leave someone insurance or something, they're not going to be able to do it in able and shield those assets. Going to need a special needs trust. Big issue. I mentioned special needs trust helps you qualify. Able account will help you qualify. How the Medicaid works is they let, and I mentioned also even this with the exempt assets, car, particularly for a house, they'll exempt those assets and let you qualify. So now you're on Medicaid, you're getting benefits, they're paying your healthcare expenses, but what are they also doing? They're keeping a tab. They're keeping track of all the expenses that they paid out for you. And what happens after you pass away? You see here the Medicaid payback. Okay, so they say, we'll let you on, but once you pass away, we want to get back, we want to get reimbursed what we got paid. So if you have an able account, start there because it's simpler. You must reimburse state for benefits using remaining funds at death. All right, so what you haven't spent, you have to pay them back, okay? And it has to be payable to all states that you may have been treated at. So if you started out in one state, I mentioned, if you started out in Georgia with Medicaid and you happen to move and you were able to get Medicaid again in Michigan, and then you pass away, you would have to pay both states. Usually what they do is try to do pro rata. It's not one state gets all theirs first and another state gets theirs. They can prorate it, but you have to pay all the states out of what you had. Special needs trust is a little different in one aspect. The first party trust, the one that was using your funds, right? I had the personal injury suit, I had the 300,000, I put that into my first party special needs trust. If I pass away, that trust, in order to be approved when I came into the program, had to have a payback clause. When I pass away, what I didn't use on the Disney vacations and the golfing and all that stuff, whatever's left, needs to go to the state to reimburse them. So the state of Georgia will get reimbursed by that special needs trust after I get pass on. If there's amount left, which probably won't, but if there's amount left, that can then be directed to someone else. The third party, the one where I was left the special needs money in the supplemental trust by someone else, right? So if my brother does a special needs trust, supplemental needs trust for me, third party, that does not need a payback. So if he creates a special supplemental needs trust for me for $250,000, I can use it for my golfing, my vehicles, my fun, And then if there's money left, say there's 180,000 left, that does not go back to the state of Georgia. That goes wherever the trust says it goes. It probably goes to other family members. So that's an important distinction between first party trusts and third party trusts. They will both protect you from your asset, your resource limit, but you want to try to leave things to someone in a supplemental needs trust if possible. So where do I usually see a mistake? Two ways. And this goes into more general estate planning, okay? If, and I don't know who's on the call, I know sometimes there's caregivers and other family members of the people in the group. So I want to kind of say this in case this, or they're watching the recording. The first way this going to be a problem is if I pass away intestate. Intestate meaning I don't have a will. If I don't have a will, when I pass away, the state of Georgia will say, my property is going to be distributed in a certain mandatory way. So if I have a spouse and children, they will break it up among them and give it to them directly. What's the problem with directly? If they have a government benefit, that benefit will, those funds that come through the intestate will be considered their personal funds and put them over that $2,000 resource limit. Because when it came to them directly. What you need to do is do a will on purpose if you have someone in your life who has a disability and they're on benefits. Because if you leave them something directly, it's going to put them over the resource limit, and they will have to do a first party trust to try to get those funds that you gave them directly out of their name into the first party trust. Now, if they're over 65, they won't be able to do that. If they're under 65, they will be able to do that. But the problem is then whatever funds they put in have to have the payback. Now, instead of, if I had done the will, or if I had created a trust and done a beneficiary designation to pay to the trust, those funds would have never gone to that person directly. So those funds would still be available as to protect from the resource limit, but none of those funds would have to be in a payback. So it's a very important when someone's doing their estate planning that we consider having certain contingent trust, supplemental need trust clauses, just in case, because I put them in there in all of my, because I do elder law, I put them in all of my wills and my trusts as a default. And people look at them and they'll say, well, why do I have all this special needs stuff? I don't have anybody with a disability. And I say, well, you don't right now. But you don't know what's going to happen and what the situation will be at that future point in time. When you pass away, that person may be on a means tested benefit. So just something to talk about with family members. And we see it a lot where people try to be helpful, especially if they were the childless aunties and uncles and they want to treat their nephews and nieces, and grandparents want to leave money to grandchildren. And we say, if you're going to do that, you have to coordinate how you leave money to someone, and make sure you don't just say to my grandchild. You would have some kind of contingent special needs, something supplemental needs trust language in there. Okay, so I know that was a whole lot, but I wanted to try to cover those key things, at least to get you started down the path of understanding some of these subtleties. So definitely can take some Q&A if you have any questions.